Do we really need to use water to make corn whiskey? Let's find out.
I just said, yes, man, right away, anything.
Alright, so I thought I was super brilliant and I came up with this idea of mashing my whiskey without water and just using something else like fruit juice. And I thought, man, nobody's ever tried this before. Of course people have tried this before. If you come up with an idea, 5,000 other people have tried it. I'm kind of coming up with my own process here. We're just gonna see what happens. So we're gonna make corn whiskey with unmalted, just regular field corn. I don't know why, but this is my favorite thing to do. Anybody else? Just me? All right. So I've got 9 pounds of corn that I need to grind up. The starches in corn are really, really stubborn. You have to gelatinize them before you can mash them with malt enzymes in order to get them to break down into sugars. The gelatinization temperature is usually around 190. It's a really big pain in the ass when you try to gelatinize corn because you basically have to almost boil it for like an hour, hour and a half sometimes. You're making porridge and it gets really thick and it really wants to scorch to the bottom of your pot, so it's a huge pain in the butt. So I'm gonna skip all that. I'm gonna grind up my corn and then I'm gonna throw it into my big old tamale steamer pot with a grain bag, and I'm gonna steam it on some apple juice to get it gelatinized. That's gonna take a long time, but the upside is I don't have to stir it and I don't have to worry about it burning. Let's get that done. Alright, so steaming a giant bag of cornmeal was a complete and total fail. Who could have guessed? I had to try because I don't know if I made this plain before. I hate dealing with corn. I love the results, but I can't stand stirring that mash. It's a nightmare. So rather than try to boil the apple juice and the cornmeal, I'm just gonna do an overnight mash. So I've got all of my juice in here, about 4 gallons of apple juice. The only problem with trying to boil all the corn in the juice in order to gelatinize it and then cool it down to mash it is that you're gonna end up boiling out a lot of the flavor. And also, because it's full of sugar already, I have a suspicion that it's going to end up making it much more likely that you're going to scorch it. If I had, you know, a fancy brew rig where it could kind of recirculate and all that stuff, that'd be great, but I don't. I have a big aluminum steamer pot and a brew bag, so this is what we're working with. I got some amylase enzymes that I threw in there, and also some glucoamylase enzymes, just to get this to break down. Now I've got my oven up to about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I want to throw this in the oven and let it sit for about an hour, and then I'm just going to turn the oven off and let it cool down overnight. Those enzymes will continue to work all day tomorrow while I'm at work. So, cool. I will see you tomorrow. So we ended up getting about 4 gallons of our mash. I'm really impressed by how much extra I was able to get by using the apple press. I got about 2.5 extra quarts pressed out of there, and that's amazing because this was a fairly low yield because I only used about 4.5 gallons of juice. It looks like I got about 4 gallons or 3.75 back. Now my gravity is a little high because it was such a dense batch. I should have gone about 5.5 gallons of juice. The gravity came out to be 1.087. Now that's crazy high. That's if it ferments out to dryness, I get 11.4% ABV. Now the cool thing is, because I mashed overnight, I put everything into the Brewer's Friend recipe calculator. I put in 10 pounds of grits and 4 gallons of juice, and it predicted 1.089, and I got 1.087. So that's pretty good. That means my efficiency was better than it's been in the past. It was better than expected for hand ground corn especially. So I want this to be a super healthy fermentation because I want this to be successful, because I'm really curious as to how it's going to taste. To me, I tasted some of the wash and it tastes like cornbread and apples. So to get this fermenting, I'm going to use some K1V 1116. The K1V is really good at keeping the apple flavors in there. Also, I'm going to use some Ferment K for yeast nutrient, and because it is a cidery type of thing, I'm going to go ahead and throw in some pectic enzyme just to help break down any pectin. And one other thing I'm going to do, because this is a higher gravity mash, I'm going to oxygenate it with my little aquarium air pump and my air stone, and we just need to give it between 15 and 30 minutes of oxygen. So now we've got the vented lid on, and we're just going to let this sit until it's fermented, and then send it off to the liquor fairy. Cross your fingers. All right, we are at 1.000, and it's only been 3 days. This stuff just tore through the sugar. Now I'm just going to add some gelatin and cold crash this stuff to see if I can get as much of that sediment to drop out as possible. So I'm just going to use some unflavored gelatin that I got from the grocery store. Doesn't matter what the brand is, as long as it's unflavored and there's no sugar in it. I'm going to take 2 of these packets of gelatin, and we're going to stir them up and then nuke them in the microwave for about 3 minutes. So as you can see, the gelatin and cold crashing worked really well. Most of the sediment has been compressed down to about 1 inch to 1.5 inches down at the bottom of the bucket. So now we just need to drain that into our boiler, and that brings me to today's sponsor, Vevor. So I've had several viewers and even a Patreon ask about whether or not you could actually use a Vevor still like this one to run whiskey. A lot of people think they're just for running brandy or sugar washes, but you can run anything in the Vevor. My liquor fairy has used the Vevor 6 times and run a variety of different things. So once again, I'm going to send the liquor fairy the Vevor to run the corn and apple whiskey wash thing. Because it's got a thumper on it, we can actually infuse a lot more flavor into this corn apple whiskey than you normally would in just a straight run. If you've never heard of the Vevor still, or you don't know how to hook up the thumper for the Vevor still, check out my previous video right here, and I will go into detail about how to set the entire thing up for maximum flavor extraction. Here's your thumper. My liquor fairy has never had a problem with it overflowing or filling up or anything like that. Right now, I've got some of my corn that was in the initial wash, and then I used the Vevor apple press to press it out and get all the liquid out. This is that corn mash, and as you can see, it's fairly dry because that press worked so good. I'm really, really glad I have that. I've got about 1 inch of corn grist down in here, the spent grain, and I've also got some very old apples that have been floating around in the back of my refrigerator, and we're just going to cut these up for the thumper. And then we're actually going to take some of our wash and add that to our apples and corn, just to give a little bit of liquid for the vapor to actually bubble through. Otherwise, you're not getting that second distillation in the thumper like you're supposed to, and you're not using it effectively. So always make sure you have just a little bit of liquid down in the bottom. And last but not least, you want to make sure that your down tube that goes into the thumper has some steel wool or copper wool mesh that's going to plunge down in there so that you don't get stuff clogged up in that tube. I'm going to send all this to the liquor fairy and get this apple corn whiskey back from them, and then we'll do a tasting. So if you want to pick up one of these Vevor pot stills, this is the 8-gallon version, and I recommend the 8-gallon because if you're brewing in 5-gallon buckets, you're going to end up invariably having some headspace in your boiler, which is a very good thing. It's a safety factor. It keeps you from boiling over, and you just end up having a much easier time, trust me. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link for that down in the video description, and there's also a coupon code, this one right here. Make sure you use that and you're going to get an additional 5% off on your purchase. It's already cheaper there than on Amazon, and then you get a 5% discount on top of it. So check out the link if you want to pick one up. All right, so back to what we're going to send to the liquor fairy. Now, if you noticed, there's only about a half a pot here. It's about 4 gallons, and you know, you can do a run with 4 gallons in this pot. It's not a big problem. However, I think I have something that would really add to this whole process. Because now at this point we have proven without a shadow of a doubt that mashing your grains in something other than water like juice works 100%. So now that that's done and I have proven my point, the whole premise for this video, I'm gonna do something a little weird. I have a shit ton of apple cider. I won't be able to drink all of this before I need the bottles for another project. So So the run is done, and the Liquor Fairy brought all of my jars back for me. I have to say I'm really pleased with the result. Now we know you can mash in juice, and that's really cool because it opens up possibilities for pretty much anything. This was just a basic apples and corn to see if I could still taste everything. So before we get to the tasting, let me go ahead and thank all of these folks right down here and anybody who's not listed. All of my Patreons, thank you guys so much. I am absolutely grateful for your support each and every day. You make these videos happen with your support and all of your feedback and ideas. So thank you guys so very much because you are still keeping my lights on. So I'm gonna do the tasting with just one of the jars of hearts, mainly because the run split itself so distinctly. The heads are all brandy. It's all apple brandy kind of flavors in there. And then down in the tails, it's all grain. It smells like corn and grain. So it's really interesting. So I'm just gonna go for a jar of the hearts and see what we get. I've proofed this down to about 45%. I'm really curious to see if we get a mix going on in here, if I can pick out both of them. I'm getting some apple, like a really clean ethanol, and some corn, a little bit of kind of a sweet corn. Wow, that's a pretty dead-on mix of apple and corn. That's weird. Honestly, I figured one of them was going to be a standout more than the other. I really didn't know if I'd get any apple in this at all because, like I said, it's just hearts. There's none of the bright aromatics added in from the heads. But I'm getting enough. Yeah, and grain. The corn flavor is not as pronounced, but it's definitely in there. I would say this is almost a 50-50 split of corn whiskey and apple brandy. I have to say this is pretty interesting. And if we end up aging it, watch out. There's a decent amount of implied sweetness to this too. I haven't decided what I want to do with this though, if I want to age it or if I want to keep it white. It's really good. So, yeah, we'll figure that out in the future. Anyway, so we did some science today. That's pretty awesome. You know, it was just kind of a crazy idea that I had, and turns out lots of people do it already. I hadn't really come across it in any reading or research that I did. So I'm really glad that I tested this out, and you know, it was only when I asked my Patreons if they had ever done it, and several of them piped up and were like, oh yeah. I don't know why it's not more common, because you get a really cool result. Like as I'm talking, it's apple brandy and corn whiskey. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to play around with this stuff a lot. Yeah. Me likey. Stay tuned to the channel because we've got several coming up this month. I've got a tequila video coming out in about a week, and then something special for St. Patrick's Day, so keep an eye out. And if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and hit the like button because it really helps out the channel. If you want to see what I'm going to do next time, get a notification for when that next video comes out, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon right next to it so you get that notification. If you have any questions, comments, you want to share some of your own juice and grain interesting experiments, please post them in the comment section down below. I'd love to get some more ideas. All right, thanks for watching. Talk at you later.